This is Emerald Radio, a podcast where we sit down with musicians, producers, and venue owners local to Pensacola and talk about our growing music scene. This episode features Robert Goodspeed, owner and operator of Night Moves and member of many bands such as Heatseeker, Malice at the Palace, and Glazed Eyes. Night Moves has made its name as a multifaceted venue, giving a home to a lot of bands that were left behind with the closing of Handlebar and Sluggos, but make sure to stay true to the music-first mindset with their slogan, no drinks, no drugs, no drama. Robert, how you doing?
How you doing, man? Great to be in here, actually.
Good, yeah. So you are like a veteran of the Pensacola music scene already, and I was trying to get a hold of like the chronology of the bands you've been in, and I couldn't do it. So if you could just lay it out, like explain your resume here. What was like the first band that you started with?
Sure. Whenever I first started high school, I had been playing guitar. I didn't really have any friends at the time, so I tried to latch on to people that played music too. And my best friend Bradley, he plays drums. We started playing like Iron Maiden, Ozzy covers, stuff like that. Just me and him. We added a couple other people to the band over time. That eventually led to this band called Palafox, which was like a hair metal, progressive metal type thing, very like 80s reminiscent. And that kind of carried me throughout everything, just because it helped me stay busy. But Palafox is only one band that I was like ever always into. Like I'm always into so many different styles of music. I remember at one point I was like jamming funk songs with him. I'm just like, hey, let's try something like this. And he wasn't really about it or anything. Right. And then we started doing some like hardcore metalcore type things. And so I think right around 2007, I was in a hardcore band that was called Who Cares? Just kind of a funny thing because I asked someone, hey, what's that band called? Who Cares? And it's just like, and then from there, went to a show in Jacksonville, and this band that I was watching and I really liked, they said, hey, if you're not in a band, you need to go start one because we need more good music in the scene. And I really liked that because as Who Cares was kind of falling off, we didn't really have anything. And I was looking around at the music scene. I'm like, there's so many people here that are into hardcore and punk, but no one's doing it. So I really took that mentality on, like from that moment. And I'm just like, I'm going to start doing everything myself. I'm going to start like making this whole thing go the way that I want it to. So I started this band called Cold Hearted. Me and this dude named Nick, and we met a drummer via YouTube. We just saw him like practicing covers, and he's like this 14-year-old kid.
And
he
was like, local or something?
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, this kid is really good. Let's get him to jam with us. We started playing, and so we did that. We did that for a couple years, toured a little bit, and then from there did this band called Bad Habits that I actually played drums in.
Now, when you're saying you started up these bands, is there overlap, or like what's the most amount of bands you've been in at one?
Oh man, I feel like embarrassed to say it. There was probably at one point where I could have easily done like 7 different sets in a night. Like I probably like at the minimum. I think that was probably. But a lot of times what happens is like I'll be in a band and then we'll put the energy somewhere else, and then we don't necessarily say, hey, we're not going to like do this other band anymore. We'll just basically only do it when asked instead of like putting a lot of time and effort into it. Like we make a certain amount of songs, let it be like a novelty type thing where it's like when we only play like on these certain type of shows. And so it's always kind of been the philosophy. You'd have like the side projects, but then you have your real stuff that kind of carries you. So realistically, when I look at it, it's like as one of the bands ends up kind of fading out, I'll make something new because I don't like to just be like, I don't want to just be complacent and just say, oh, well, we don't really play anymore, because I love playing music. So that's kind of why it's always so many different groups. Like some
you
people
always want to have something that you're like, this is what I'm doing now. Though.
Yes,
like,
exactly. So then from Bad Habits, then it turned into this band called Malice at the Palace. And that one ended up being like way bigger than any of us ever thought, which was awesome. We did a lot of touring. We did a record on a really big label, like a label that we all grew up with, which was super exciting. And then from there, kind of slowed down, but kept doing stuff. Did this band Heat Seeker, this band Apostle.
Heat Seeker is insane, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Saw you guys at the other night,
thank you.
Radio Rock. Yeah,
yeah, it's
super
fun.
Cool.
It's different than how it kind of ended up supposed to be. But so we did Heat Seeker, Burning Strong, and then from I think it was my like 11th or 12th grade year, me and my younger brother started a band, and we wanted it to be like this, like pop, like the Maine Mayday Parade style type thing. And we just couldn't find a singer. We're like, I don't know anyone around here that can sing like that. But it's like, we need one. So I was like, I'll write some lyrics and I'll sing to it. And I was just like, let's make it like this punk thing where, you know, like my voice doesn't really like translate pop wise, but I can hit a melody at least.
Right,
so we did this band called 10th Inning, and that was a really big thing for a little bit with all of us because it was music that I think we all like really put a lot of like ourselves into and like really threw ourselves out there. So it was fun. Did it with my younger brothers, both of them. One of them joined like later on in the whenever he was old enough. I think he was probably 17, his first show that he actually played, but we had probably been playing at that point since he was like 9 or so. So
wow.
I don't know if exactly the timeline for that really matches up, but yeah.
No, that's enough of a
it's like a lot of stuff. So
that's enough of a timeline to give people an idea. Yeah. Very cool, man. So you've got to have at least one really weird touring story, right? I mean, with all these bands that you go on tour with. Did you tour with all of them?
No, I toured mainly with Mouse at the Palace, but I did a little bit, like weekenders here and there.
Okay.
Let me think of like a really weird touring story. Okay, I guess this is a good one. We were driving from... let's see, I think it was Denver or Colorado Springs to Kansas City overnight. And we made it about 60% of the way there. And all of a sudden the van just starts shaking out on us. And I'm like, this is my worst nightmare. Like, we're not making any money on this. And now I'm going to have to throw like all this on my credit card. I'm just trying to like really think of like what to do. And the van just stalls. Like it would drive and then stall, and we just couldn't figure out what was going on. So call a tow truck. Luckily, one was open at like 6 a.m. We get this guy that takes us to a shop, and the shop was like a very they don't do like aftermarket parts. They're like very like I guess blue collar in the sense that they're like we're gonna like do this the right way, or we're not doing it at all type thing. And he was just like, we can get you the part, but it won't be until the weekend is over. And I think it was Friday at that point. And we still had shows. Like, we're like, we got to like play these shows or else we're never going to make this money back. And so I'm like, I guess this is what it is. And so we're like riding back in the tow truck to the van, and I'm talking to the tow guy about it. And he goes, look, I'm not trying to be this way. Like, I don't like to be the person that steals business, but like, I'll fix it for you. And we're like, really? And not only did he like offer to fix it for like, you know, $10,000, or I think it was $1,000 overall, but he offered to fix it for like $400. And I was just like, well, yeah, like, he's like, can you do it today? He says, yeah, I can do it today. We don't have any, like, this was a city that, I'm not kidding, during the time that it took him to fix the car, we walked around the entire city. We saw the entire city. Like, we tried to go to, I think it was Holiday. I can't remember, but we couldn't go in like a certain, I think it was Veterans Day actually. We couldn't go in the library or something like that because like that was the only cool thing that we could do was go to the library, which is like
it's like a one-stop town.
And so we ended up going to this little bar, and like they only had like elk burgers, and we're like I'm just like really like, where are we right now? And so they were just so cool about like the whole thing. They fixed it up for us and everything, and they're like, well, we want to help you more. Like, how can we help more? And we're like, what do you mean? Like, you fixed our van, we're able to play shows. We're like, yeah, but like, don't you have like some merch or something? So like, we gave them like some merch, but they're like, we're not taking it. Like, we want to pay for it. So it ended up like bringing our bill down even more, which was really nice. And I was super stoked on that whole situation. And we're driving. I'm just like on top of the world, 15 miles out, van breaks down again. I'm like,
oh my
God, are you kidding me? So I call him up and I'm like, hey, so the van broke down again, But this time I noticed that there's actually a check engine light. And he goes, oh, well, I'll bring my little computer out there. And he goes out there and he realizes it's like a crankshaft sensor, and it's like a $15 fix or something. And I'm just like, did we seriously just like get, like, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it needed a new fuel pump all along, but like just the fact that happened.
You like paid for a fuel pump and everything like that.
And so,
like, oh no.
And so like one of the reasons too that I was like so ready to get back on the road and do all this other stuff was because I'm like, oh, we have these great cities lined up. Like we're going to play, this awesome show in Milwaukee and this awesome show, and I can't remember where else afterwards, and like those shows were like pretty shot, and I'm just like, God, I was like, but then we ended up playing what I thought was going to be this awful show. It was a house show in Cincinnati, and we got there, and I think there was maybe like 7 people that were there, and I'm like, it is what it is for this show. And we play it, and it ends up being like this really awesome show because everyone's into it, and every person in there bought merch. So we ended up making probably more money on that show than we did like on a lot of other shows, just because like it was just the right type of people to be around. And like, so it's just one of those things where you never know what to expect. So if you always kind of go into something open-minded, you're never going to be really let down by it, which is, so that's probably my best like tour story that I can remember.
That's a great story. A lot of tour stories are just horror stories. That one's a bit more wholesome.
It was a horror story at the time, but I think we made out of it the best that we could have. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was talking to somebody. I think it was it must have been Barrett from Resolve, and I was talking to him, and I was like, how much do you save up to go on tour? And he was like, dude, you could tour if you have like a van or something like that. You could tour for like $1,500. Like you just save up like a bunch of money and put it together and just like hit the road. And I think that quelled a lot of the things that I had thought before, like just the preconceived notions that came out of nowhere, you know, because I was like, dude, if something happens, man, you got to like really, you know, you got to make sure you have enough money to pay for it or whatever. And,
right.
You know, a lot of what I hear is just like, nah, man, you just kind of figure it out and stuff just kind of happens.
It's true. I mean, Barrett's approach is probably smart because, I mean, like, if you're prepared, what can go wrong, really? You know, obviously tons of things can go wrong, and that's, like, dumb to even say that. But if you go on tour thinking, here's my cushion for living, then this is all I need. And the way that we would do it was we would, instead of buying a van, we would just rent a minivan. And I just used like credit card points, and we would do that. And then use money that we made from the shows to get to each city. And then the money that we made in merch, we got to keep afterwards because, you know, a t-shirt costs $6. We sell it for 12 or 15. Over time that adds up, and then afterwards we have some money and we kind of recoup what we spent in food and whatnot on the trip. So but also being in a minivan, you end up like saving a lot of money on gas because these like 15 passengers is like what, 10-12 miles a gallon versus like minivan being like almost 30, like a brand new one that you never have to worry about with any. So it's a different way that we would tour, but it made sense. Like we were all crammed. We would borrow stuff at every show. Yeah. People probably didn't like that, but I mean, at the end of the day, like that's how I feel like it makes sense because it helps get more bands going, and that's like one reason like at Night Moves why I have like
that's the whole thing too, is like you show up and you just got to be like cool with helping out the other bands, and like, you know, everyone's doing everything. If you got to backline a kid or something like that, then whatever, you got to be cool about it.
It's all a networking thing. It's all about like, if this band is from New Orleans and they're coming here, we're gonna bring a lot of people out for them so that they'll hopefully return the favor down the road. And that's something that I really like about the bands around here is that everyone gets it. Like there's a couple every now and then that at first they're not quite in line with that vision, but then all of a sudden they start seeing it and they're like, you know, like Juice Is Okay, like back in the day, I always paid them at every show, and I never was like ever gonna say, hey dude, I can't pay you, because they always bring people. Right. But one time I booked a show and there wasn't a ton of people and I still tried to pay them, and Matt was just like, no man, they're the touring band, like make sure that they get it. And I'm like, dude, that's the type of thing I like to hear, because it really does make a huge difference.
And those people are in it to play music, you know what I mean? Like those people are not in it to like make a bunch of money or cash out or anything like that. And I apologize. You were starting to talk about Night Moves, and I cut you off, but that is one thing I wanted to talk about. Night Moves is like, the best venue right now, and it's like helping out all those bands that were kind of left behind whenever Handlebar closed down and like Sluggos closed down. I want to know just the mindset behind starting it. I mean, it's obviously a labor of love because it's a nonprofit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like every show that I go to there, I see you and you're like hauling a bunch of waters and like like Big Jerk sodas and stuff like that, and then you're running sound and I just want to know like was there like a catalyst to starting this venue, like, or was it just something that you've always had in your mind, like, that's one day I'm gonna have this?
Well, it kind of goes back to the whole thing where I was talking about when I saw that one band and they're like, if you don't have a band, you need to start one. And so like always is like, if I don't have something, how do I learn how to do it? And like even just like around my house, just like, I don't know how to put up a wall, but I'm going to learn how. Like it seems like it'd be fun. And, we built a fence the other day at my parents' house. So that was, those type of things. But it was the whole venue aspect. And we had the Handlebar for so long. And I think all of us got really complacent with it because everyone felt like this was always going to be here. We don't have to go to every show. We don't have to like beg for changes. We don't have to do anything because we're always going to have a place to do stuff. And when it closed down, that left basically just Chizuko being open. And we're kind of in that boat where they're like, we can't take on every show either.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just exhausting.
And back then they were only open for like a couple
I think so.
days,
Yeah, I think that they pretty much only they were doing shows I think Wednesday through Sunday, and I think that got really exhausting. So I think that they were just like, now we're going to do just 2 shows a week, which I totally get. Like I'm like, if in a perfect world that is probably the best formula, but then obviously you leave a lot of people out if that happens. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so whenever Handlebar closed, I was just thinking, let's see what Chizuko can do. Let's see what Live Juice Bar can do. Let's see if these 2 things alone will end up being what's going to like keep the scene going. And I just never really, I feel like there was still more missing. And so I was just kind of like researching it, and I was just like, how hard is this going to be? Like how, if I started a venue, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I was like, well, the worst thing that could happen is no one shows up to any show I ever book. It's like, is that going to happen? Probably not.
Right.
I don't think I've had a show where no one's paid. So that's really awesome so far, at least. But the more I thought about it, I was just like, what do I really want to accomplish with this venue? Is it that I want to make a venue, or is it that I want to like create a music scene, like create a scene that where everyone is here for the bands playing, and there's really no other reason that you would be there other than that. And so that was kind of my mindset, is like, I want to do that. I think that that's going to like be a better path to the future than just like, a couple bands here and there that like only get to play shows, every so often. Like, I don't know how often Honey Days was able to play like back in the day or anything like that. Or, I mean, Juice is Okay. That was like one.
We have a strict no Honey Days rule in this podcast.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah, you're totally joking. I always like, whenever the other bands come in here, like we had chat, and I was like, don't talk about Honey Days.
Oh,
and
okay.
they were like, why? And I was like, because then it'll look like I'm using this to peddle.
No, it's all good.
But that's one thing that I look up to you for, because you started Night Moves, and it's not like you're putting yourself on every bill or anything like that, even though you have like 7 bands that you are in. Like, was that one like? But I mean, if obviously if there's someone really cool and you're like, dude, I would love to play with these guys, then
for sure.
you'll put yourself on there. But like, I mean, it's not like you're using it to like peddle your own music, or
right?
Like
yeah,
that.
I never really have been about that. Like, I'm more about like other people versus me. Like, at the end of the day, like if I could have no facial recognition with Night Moves, I probably would. I like to just kind of be like the behind the scenes type thing anyway. But it's just kind of how it is. But I was thinking about like all these different bands in the area that never just got the chance, and Juice is Okay being one of them. And I'm like, these guys are awesome. They bring out a great crowd. The young kids are what drive the scene,
right? And
they don't have anywhere to play.
They can't get in. I didn't even like think about that.
That just
like,
feels wrong to me. And so I was just like, this has to change somewhere and by someone, and I don't think anyone's going to do it, so I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I was just trying to figure out the right way to do it. And being that I decided that I wanted it to be more like a long-term, like community building thing, I realized that was like why I chose to go nonprofit with it, because I felt like it was more of what are we doing for the music community versus am I just making Robert Goodspeed's music venue, you know? So that's kind of the whole mindset behind it.
No, that's cool. That's really admirable. So there was no point where you were like, that's it, start my own venue, you know, like just like leaving the scene and just like, you know.
I guess there was kind of one point, and it was related to there. I guess there's probably three main things. One, the Handlebar closed, so that was one big thing. Two, I tried to get a show at Live Juice Bar. They did an open mic, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand like that's important to you, but I'm trying to give you like a really big show here, and like we just couldn't get on the same page. So I was just like, okay, I'm gonna really have to figure something out for my own. And then three was realizing that, you know, Juice couldn't really play in a place where there's like beer, because, you know, not many bar owners are gonna want a bunch of like 17-year-olds in their bar. Right. And it's so those three
regardless
things,
of whether they're the best Pensacola
yes,
band.
I agree. Yeah. So those three things all kind of led me to wanting to start it.
That is cool. That is cool. And so like the one thing that I really like about it is the location. I mean, it's like right next to the Psychedelic Shack or whatever. It's like pretty, it's like, you know, it's on Plantation Road?
Plantation,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, right off of Davis, or right off of Creighton, off of Davis. Was that one thing that you were focusing on? I mean, like where, like placement of it? I mean, did you?
A little bit. Like obviously in my head, I didn't want to do it in a place that was felt unsafe. I like that it's kind of in an isolated area, not a lot of like blue traffic or anything like that. It just kind of feels like it's very, you're minding your own business there, and everyone kind of respects that, and no one's really out to get you there. And so I really like that about it. It's really close to my house, which is nice because I can check on it when I need to, just in case. And then I felt like it's a pretty central area. Like, I mean, it's right off the interstate, which is good for anyone traveling from, let's say, Navarre, Pace, any side of Pensacola where they have a interstate access. It's like right there. So that was one big thing. But I've been thinking about it a little bit more, and I'm like, well, how could I be even more central? So I ultimately think I want to try to move it downtown if I can, and that's kind of a bomb. I haven't really told that to anyone. So
by the time this comes out, you might be a little bit further.
Right. Yeah. And so, so I'm thinking about it in a way that I can make that happen. But as far as like the actual mechanics of it, not quite there yet. But obviously kind of outgrown it. You know, people talk about the size of it and whatnot, and it's an intimate thing. It's like you get it or you don't. Yeah. And I think there's some people that just don't, and that's fine if you're not into playing a small thing like that. That's cool. But you know, we had a show the other night, and it was just like everyone was dancing, everyone was having a great time getting on stage, like really just digging it. And I'm like, this is what this place is about. Like the people that are here to just enjoy music and have a good time. And so,
dude, that was one of the most like fun shows that we played ever.
Yeah.
Like it was insane. And I mean, the freeing aspect of it, you know what I mean? Where you're like, okay, this isn't like a bar. You know what I mean? They're not like, you know, you better bring a crowd or else, you know, you're never playing here again or anything like that. You know, it's more just like, we can come here, play, if, you know, and people will dig the music, and they don't have to be drunk or...
You have your undivided attention, essentially.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And I really, really like that about it. So, you know, if you do end up moving, I hope it's because you're trying to grow it and not...
Oh, yeah,
you know,
for sure.
like,
That's biggest thing is like... You know, I've actually turned down a couple show offers because I'm like, this is like way too small for this. And I was like, I could make it like a really like tight knit thing, but then everyone's gonna be mad because we're sweating on each other. And I'm like, let's try to make as many people happy with this as we can before we start really doing anything like that right now.
Hey, it sounds good in that spot by the bathrooms anyway, man.
Yeah.
You just funnel the people back
exactly.
there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, that's funny, man. So I think a lot of bands would want to know like how they go about getting a show at Night Moves.
Right.
And I know that like, reaching out to you is, I mean, that's pretty much the only way. But like, do you have an email that they can send their stuff to? Or?
Right. Yeah. So that was kind of the best way too, is through the email. It's nightmovespensacola@gmail.com. A lot of times people will hit me up on Messenger, and I try to do my best, like separating like personal and the venue. So sometimes people will message me. I'm like, yeah, that date looks good. And then they get back to me like a day later and like, all right, we'll confirm it. But then I don't put it on the calendar, and it just kind of slips my mind. So I try to like really, really harp on like, if you want something done, email is like the best way, because it's like a running list of things that I have to actually take care of. Like when I read the email, it's done, like, and that's just how it is. Like if someone says, hey, I want this band to play, I take the time to listen to every single band. And I'm like, who would this band sound good with? I'm like, okay, this band is a kind of a funky, bluesy band. So like I could put any number of these bands on, or this band's a punk band. I can put any number of these punk bands on, but I could also put them on with metal bands and stuff too. So I take the time to screen everything, but in general, the best way for me is when bands say, hey, we'd like to play there. Are these dates available? We want to play with some of our friends. And they put the whole lineup together, because then it's almost like they're kind of putting themselves in the position that I was in back when I was starting like bands and doing shows, because then people are putting together their own lineups. They're learning how to promote things. And that goes further, I think, than me picking it out for them, because then it gives someone like a little bit more of like a maybe like entrepreneurial perspective on it, I think.
Yeah, and like a lot of people like hear that kind of like the music business aspect of their band, and they just kind of like, oh no, I don't want to deal with that. And like that's a huge part of it, because I've learned a lot about promoting and stuff just from playing like this last year. Just like being back in the Pensacola music scene after leaving Pensacola for so long. And it's definitely, it's definitely a lot different than it was like when we were in high school, and it was just like, yeah, we got booked on this show, and it was like not left up to us to do that kind of, you know what I mean? That kind of promoting. It was kind of like the venue was on it. And, but that's something that everybody needs to know how to do, because it also lets if like a venue is like, like kind of screwing you over, I guess, because it's like, okay, well, these guys aren't like doing anything to promote our show. You know what I mean? Like they didn't give us any heads up that they were doing, you know what I mean? Like this is kind of weird. But another thing I wanted to ask was, okay, so you brought it up briefly. You let people choose who they want to play with. But if there is, a band that's coming up and they want to play at Night Moves, and they're just like, we don't know anybody. Like we're, barely from Pensacola. What would you tell them to do? Would you say, listen, I got it? Or would you just be like, look, here's a lot of like a list of the local bands, you know what I mean? Listen to their stuff and reach out to them, this is their Facebook and stuff like that, because it would be better coming from them, you know what I mean? Like, what would you tell them?
If it's a younger band, I try to like take them under my wing a little bit. I feel like I want them to succeed. And so one way that I'll do it is I'll try to put together the lineup for them, especially if it's like their first time. I think like Chad Hawley was one of the first bands that, and Juice, like these bands that I hear and I'm like, these guys, like they're just like this close to like being really like a big part of this, but they just don't have those connections yet. So you put them on these shows with these people, and there's people like you, and there's people like Matt, and there's people like me that can like help introduce everyone to each other. And then you play these shows. Then the next time around, they're like, hey, we want to play there again. We reached out to Shuggy, and we reached out to Paint the City, and we said, hey, you guys, can you play with us this time around? And you add like a new band to it that they didn't play with the last time. Obviously, people don't want to see the same show every time, but some band combos just make a lot of sense, and it just makes like you want them like on like as many shows as possible together.
Yeah, definitely.
And so if it's a younger band like that, like that's something that I'll do. If it's a touring band, what I'll usually recommend, I'll just say, hey, these are a list of bands that you guys sound like, see if you can get one on board and I'll do the rest. Like, and then it's like, it's almost like I I can gauge their seriousness on it. Because if someone's just like, hey, we want to come play, it's just like, okay, cool. Well, it's like, do you want to play here specifically, or do you want to play and just like make money? Like, I don't really know exactly what you're trying to do here, but this is like, this is a nonprofit. Like, if we wanted to make money, we'd be like a bar selling liquor or something like that. Like, this is like really about the community aspect of everything.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you said that, some bands are too big to book. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to lay out a scenario here.
Okay.
Hypothetical. Bob Seger comes out of retirement.
Okay.
And he says, I saw that your venue is named
Right.
Night Moves. I want to play at Night Moves.
Yep.
Do you put him on inside?
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then just deal with the 700 people.
We
that
just
are like,
figure
trying to get
out,
it.
we do some sort of like 1 in, 1 out scenario.
Yeah.
And that's the only, I thought about that. It's like, what happens if there is a show that big? And the best way to obviously avoid fire code and stuff is 1 in, 1 out. It's annoying and no one wants to do that. But if that's the best way that the show actually can happen, then yeah. So in a hypothetical scenario where there is something too big and I'm like, this could work, but we just got to make it. Yeah, I would say I wouldn't hold back from that at least. So.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate everything you're doing for the community.
Thank
man.
you.
You're like killing it in every aspect of the music scene, and we appreciate you coming on. Did you have social media for Night Moves or any of the bands or anything like that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, if everyone could follow the Night Moves Instagram, keep up with all the shows. It's Night Moves Pensacola, just at Night Moves Pensacola on Instagram. That's the best way. Facebook is a really good way too. I try to keep track of both of those the best that I can. And we got a website launched that you can keep up with. We'll try to update it a little bit more frequently. Three different platforms to do that is a lot, but definitely will make more of an effort to do it. Especially so that we can get just all sorts of different people seeing different sides of it. Some people don't have Facebook or Instagram, so then they end up just going to the website or, only have Instagram. So any of those platforms to keep up with it would be awesome because, just keeping up to date with everything and having like a centralized place where what bands are playing, when they're playing, so to make plans to do that would be the best way to do it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
And then the everything else, like the bands that you're in. You got any social media for them?
Let's see. I guess there's one. Glazed Eyes. Yeah, Glazed Eyes FL. I think is
that's what it is.
Yeah, that's the only one that really has one. We do a lot of Facebook and Bandcamp, and probably should be doing like more with it. But at this point, it's all for fun for us. For the most part, we're just kind of we just like to play music. And for just like the feeling that it gives you more so than, hey, we want to be big. But, that's kind of why, Night Moves is around, is because I kind of came and saw that with myself. And I'm like, well, if I had a restart, how would I do it differently? And there's so many bands around here that want to do it. And so the best I can do is say, hey, in my experience, this is what I would have done, or this is what some people in back in the day would do, and this is how you could probably do it. And I was giving Chad Hawley some advice on something like that, and I've been giving Matt a lot of advice with Juice. I helped him book a couple out of town shows.
Oh, sweet.
So that's ultimately just trying to make sure that everyone can eat in Pensacola is how I want to do it. So
we're about to listen to "Take My Hand" by Glazed Eyes. Robert, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Driving slowly through close to you when I can't speak out loud. So I write my feelings down. Can't fight the feeling, 'cause I know you're leaving. So I gotta let you know. Hold the wheel while I rest these tired eyes. Safe and sound, my darling, with you by my side. Gave my soul to you and hoped you'd understand. When you're ready, baby, just take my hand. Hold the wheel while I rest these tired eyes. Safe and sound, my darling, with you by my side. Gave my soul to you and hoped you'd understand. When you're ready, baby, just take my hand. Just take my hand. Oh, just take my hand. Ooh, yeah. Oh,
That was Robert Goodspeed. Go check out his bands Heat Seeker and Glazed Eyes, and follow Night Moves Pensacola on Facebook and Instagram so you can see their schedule and list of shows that they have. If you'd like to be on the podcast, contact us at theemeraldradio@gmail.com. And if you want to be on the podcast but don't have any recorded material, contact us at Fresco Recording Services at gmail.com for session information.